Hello, everyone. It is Jennie and Laurie of Astropath. That is Jennie of Hidden Path Astrology. You can find her at hiddenpathastrology.com. You can find me at astrolore.org, or actually, I'm in the middle of building a new website. So I'm not sure if you'll find me at astrolore.org or lauriefarrington.com, but this will get straightened out soon. At any rate, here we are today to do our video of the Virgo season. We are excited to be back together to make a video because we haven't made one together in a long time. Now, I want to encourage you all to, first of all, like this video, subscribe to our channel, do all those good things, and write us ask questions, write comments. We love to hear from you, and we'll do our best to respond. Also, you can, follow Jennie. She does some great stuff. She does monthly meditations for each season, which is a really helpful thing. If you want to check those out, do so. And yeah, go to both of our websites and check us out. And we do consultations and teaching and all the rest of it. So with all of that being said, let's get on to Virgo season.
That's right. Okay, well, before we dive more into the particulars of the season, let's talk a little bit about what Virgo itself means. Virgo is the mutable earth sign. That means that it is the most flexible and versatile of all the earth signs, but it is still concerned with earth issues. So things like practicality, tasks lists, concrete matters, the cold, hard reality of things are all going to be part of the Virgo situation. And then Virgo is really concerned with organization and implementing things. And it's very good at sort of saying, you know what, this stuff isn't serving me, so I'm chucking it out. This stuff over here is what I really need to do. So it's really good at sifting through all of the parts and pieces to decide what really matters. And part of what really matters to Virgo is being helpful, is being of service, is having a sense of humility and doing things that make life better for people around them. So I really like that about Virgo. It really does have that desire to kind of help out.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit. What do you have to add, Laurie, to your?
Oh, I love
You love
Virgo.
Virgo. And you're gonna say that.
Anyone who
Yeah.
knows me knows that Virgo really, I think it's my favorite sign. I just love Virgo. And I think it's the humility and the kindness of Virgo that I really, really appreciate. I think of all the signs, Virgo is able to see potential and can really understand how to reach that potential for themselves and for others. And, Virgo has a terrible reputation. People talk about how picky and critical, and you can see, if you can really see potential and you want to reach it, you can see how criticism and pickiness can get in the way. But people with a strong Virgo, if they are being picky or critical, they're being that's more turned on themselves than anyone. So it's really important that Virgo understand and appreciate themselves for the fact that whatever it is, within themselves that they're trying to perfect is for the service of others. And the humility. I don't know. I love Virgo. I could talk about Virgo all day long. And as far as the Virgo season itself goes, I've always been intrigued with the shift from Leo season to Virgo, because it's such a dramatic shift. You go from the height of ego to this humility, and it's really a very, very powerful shift. You think of Leo season, everybody just wants to go to the beach and play and soak up the sun, and then the sun moves into Virgo and everybody's ready to buckle down and start going back to school, all the things. You just watch the culture change on a dime when the sun enters Virgo. It's a fascinating thing to watch.
Yeah. And I always like that part of it, that zodiac cycle and how each sign comes in kind of in response to the one before it. And each sign is dramatically different than the one before it. I mean, Leo is a fire sign and it's a fixed sign. So now we're in an earth sign that's a mutable sign, and everyone is like that. It really has to make this big transition from one to the other. And I like how it describes that. And that's
Yeah.
why I like doing these seasonal videos, because it
Yeah.
is a time to switch, and I think the other thing I just want to add to the conversation about Virgo is does also tie in with your digestive system,
Mm.
and it ties in with your nervous system because it's ruled by Mercury, the planet Mercury, which is so changeable and quick, and so because of that, I think Virgo is also a really great time to kind of get your habits on track.
Mhm.
Like think about, like what are some little tiny shifts that you might want to make to the way that you eat? And I'm not talking about big things. I'm talking about something small. Maybe you just need to hydrate more, I mean, or maybe you just want to eat more salad greens at lunch or something really small and achievable because it is about achievable goals.
Yeah.
And then also, I just think it's a good time to think about how do you take care of your body. So if you need to slow down, you might need to calm down, you might need to get more grounded, it is an earth sign. So those are also things I think that are really helpful so that you can sustain the workload that is starting to happen at this time of year. So yeah.
The only other thing I think I want to add is just thinking of it. This is the 6th season, right? So it's halfway. It's like this is really a time of checking in with ourselves. How are we doing? And I think, all the health stuff comes in there.
Yeah.
How are we doing? Really, this is a time to pay attention to how far you've come since since Aries season, how far you've come and where you stand now. I do love
Yeah.
Virgo. I love
I
Virgo.
mean,
I love Virgo season.
yes. And the truth is you can't help other people unless you're, able to. And being able to means being well rested enough to do it, having had something to eat so that you can handle it, being able to be calm if somebody else is freaking out. So it's self-care in the service of other people. It's the total opposite of like self-care for any sort of selfish reason. It's just really about wanting to turn it and say, how can I help people? And you've got to kind of slow down first in order to do that. So yeah,
Yeah,
cool. What next,
absolutely.
Lori?
And what'd you say?
So what next, Lori?
What next? Well, we can look at the chart of the moment that the sun moves in. You ready to look
Oh,
at that?
yeah,
All right,
yeah, that's a good plan.
Did I open the right thing? Yes, I did.
Oh, no, that's the Aries season.
Oh, here we
There you
go.
go. You got it.
This is what we've got. Okay,
Okay.
so here is the moment. The sun has just moved into Virgo. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about this chart itself because we've got a listing of all the stuff that goes on after this. But what we did want to point out is just how how things are lined up. We've got the sun and Venus in Virgo. We've got Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, and we've got Jupiter and Mars up here in Gemini. So these are all mutable signs. And what happens is we come into these positions where we have oppositions and squares.
Mm,
So there's a certain tension happening between them within the scope of the mutable signs.
yeah. So that suggests a couple things. One, it suggests that there may be some struggles around feeling unstable this season because it's mutable signs, mutable squares. There's a lot of tension, so it does, imply a feeling of like, whoa, like, huh, here I thought I was here and now we're over there. So that's something to just keep in mind as we work through the season. On a positive note, it also just means that that's also where the growth is and where growth is available is learning the very fact of that these are mutable signs means that that you can change things, that you can alter the trajectory of things more easily than usual. It's just that it might be like whoops too easily, and it's like you fell over. So but that's kind of a theme, just that mutability and the stress to the mutability overall.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the changes just require, or a lot of the struggles within this just require adaptability.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
anytime there's squares that are between squares and oppositions between mutable signs, it's a lot easier than if they were between cardinal or fixed because of the adaptability.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah,
helps.
You know, it kind of reminds me of like being in a yoga class, and if you reach too far and then you pull something. So there is the idea that an injury could have, you know, with that much instability, that it could be, you know, you're worrying about illness or injury because it's so easy to get knocked out of equilibrium, and it's great to be adaptable. So those are kind of the two ends of like how to handle that kind of
Interesting.
instability that's happening.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
And I think the only other thing we wanted to mention is, you know, with this open is Pluto is getting ready to is retrograde. It's
mhm,
going to back into Capricorn one last time.
yeah.
And when it does so, we are having this grand trine created between the planets as they move into Virgo. I guess it's just Mercury that's going to also no, I
Yeah.
guess Venus and the Sun will form a grand trine with Uranus and Pluto. And that's a real major statement of a gift to me.
Yeah, and that's sort of like we just talked about problems and instability. Well, guess what? Then you've got this grand trine in Earth, which is, if nothing, but stable. So it is kind of an interesting, it's kind of like watch the change, flow with the change, don't go too far over because you might topple over, and then lean into the idea that there's actually quite a bit of stability available, like when you know, on a different level that you have to kind of find, and then you get this gift of like, okay, I can actually
Yeah.
withstand this.
Really, you know,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, you know, if you've got your chart, look at the houses that have the earth signs.
Mhm.
The Taurus, the Virgo, and the Capricorn. Look at those three houses and really understand that there's a lot of energy for something wonderful to occur in
Yeah.
that area.
Yeah. And then, you know, the one thing to think about too is at the beginning of the season, Mercury, the ruling planet of all the Virgo and all the Gemini planets, is retrograde. It's going to station direct on August 28th, and then it's going to move into Virgo a little bit later on. And so it is moving into Virgo on September 9th. So once it does that, it really adds to the Virgo flavor, because then you have the ruling planet of Virgo also in Virgo. So that's the other thing to think about. It's going to feel a little bit different for the first part of the season, with it still retrograde and then still in Leo. And then it will change into all of your focus will end up being in that Virgo direction once
Yeah.
Mercury goes into Virgo. So
Yeah,
cool.
those first few weeks until Mercury goes retrograde, that's going to be a very different flavor with Virgo being ruled by Mercury retrograde. That's going to
Yeah.
bring in a very different flavor there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then turning direct. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
think once it turns direct, it's going to really allow, I think it's going to really allow that grand trine to function more.
Yeah. It's like bringing your mind in alignment. Like this other
Right.
things happen, then finally when Mercury's in Virgo, then your mind is like, "Yep, this is what we're doing, and I'm fully focused, and I'm fully ready, and it will be more effective." You'll be more effective in the second half of the season than the first half. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Okay, well, let's go forward to, whoops, I got a quick trigger finger
All
here.
right. Yeah.
All right, so the sun enters Virgo on August 22nd. That's a Thursday. So that's where we begin. And we have Venus squaring Mars that day. So that little piece of a week, there's not a whole lot happening there. The Venus square Mars can bring in a little tension, but then Mercury is sextiling Mars, still retrograde. Yeah, at that point, Mercury will still be retrograde. Sextiling Mars on that Saturday. Is there anything you want to say about that piece of time?
Oh, just kind of we enter into Virgo right away with you know, square energy happening, like the tension
Oh
that can
yeah,
bring
and that
some instability. So it kind of is just like, you know, a little reminder right when we enter in. So yeah.
yeah.
Nope, that's the first few days. And then, you know, we're coming into that last quarter moon phase. So we had a full moon in Gemini on August 19th. I'm sorry, a full moon in Aquarius. Get a grip, Aquarius. And now we have a last quarter moon in Gemini here on the 26th. So that's just, you know, the moon cycle's coming to a close. It's that waning last week. So this is that week in general, is always going to have a flavor of kind of, bringing things down to like closing, a little bit more of an internal facing week. But it's really interesting because Venus is a lot
Mm.
of great stuff happening with Venus this week. So that's a symbol
Mm.
for, your financial situation, maybe some relationships in your life, those kinds of things. Maybe something to do with your values or your sense of beauty is really kind of at the forefront of this week. I like that.
It's
Yeah.
really an interesting week when you look at that. Mercury stations direct, Venus, and it's interesting because Venus first trines Uranus while Venus is still in Virgo.
Mm,
And then 2 days later, it trines Pluto after it's entered Libra.
yeah.
Is that right? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
no, that's right.
And
And it kind
Mercury,
of,
and
yeah.
right in between the two, Mercury stations direct, and
Mhm.
Venus also opposes Neptune. So
Yeah.
yeah, Venus is all, this whole week is all about Venus.
Yeah. It's like a, little wake up, nice, pleasant wake up that happens. And then, I don't know, some kind of, maybe even a transcendent feeling available there on the 28th. I don't know. Be interesting to see what happens. Depends, of course, where, if it hits anything sensitive in your natal chart. And then
Right.
Venus loves to be in Libra. So it's like, yay, I'm home.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and then we also have that Uranus stationing retrograde as well, which really is just a statement about Uranus is going to retrograde like the outer planets every year, a few times. And in this case, it really it has to do with the relationship with the sun. And so Uranus is out of that zone and it's stationing retrograde. It looks like it's turning backwards in the sky, but it's not something. I don't know about you, but I don't go crazy thinking too much about those outer planets retrograde. It's just good to know.
No, it's just, it's stationing retrograde at 27 degrees Taurus.
Mm.
So if you've got planets that are near that point, or, a little bit like 26, 25, you know that Uranus is getting ready to back up over it. So, depending on your own chart, that's going to be significant or not. But as far as just the fact that it's going retrograde, I don't put a whole lot into that either.
Yeah. No, that you're right. I like how you brought that in. Just yeah, it really just depends on whether it's making an aspect
Right.
with something important in your chart. So,
Right. Yeah.
and then Pluto retrograde, going back into Capricorn for the very last time.
And that's a big deal. I think that's really a big deal. I think it's important that we all look at our charts. What house holds Capricorn? The house in your chart that holds Capricorn, and we are using whole sign house system, has been through dramatic, powerful changes over the past number of years. And there's been, some respite, I don't know, on that area as Pluto has been in Aquarius. So for the past year and a half or so, there's been a lot of change in your Aquarius house. But now with Pluto going back into Capricorn, it's something in that area, that some powerful change in that area that's not complete, that hasn't been completed, and we have to step back into that area and take care of some old business.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Wow.
That is interesting. So look
Yeah.
at your Capricorn house and think about what's been left undone. What do you still need to go back and revisit?
Yeah. And then, and then we start. I think that new moon in Virgo follows really nicely on that because it's kind of like, I don't know, there's a lot of internal kind of things going on there. And then you have this new moon in Virgo where it's like, okay, the moon cycle's starting again. So what seed do you want to plant that has to do with those Virgo topics we already mentioned? To me, this is a perfect time to think about if there are some changes in those habits that you've been thinking, that you want to do, you want to try. And I would just encourage you, if that is true, encourage you just to think small, think details, think achievable goals. This isn't giant, big stuff, but this is just those little tweaks that end up making a big difference, but you don't have to worry about that. You just have to worry about, do I want to shift something a little bit? So that's to me what the new moon in Virgo symbolizes. And then the week ahead here of like, okay, what do I need to do? And it's kind of it's a pretty intense week.
Yeah.
once you plant that new seed. I mean, yeah, look at that. What do you think of that,
Mars
Mercury?
square
Yeah.
Neptune. That's a
Yeah.
tricky one, isn't it? You know, you just think about the energies that these two planets bring. Mars just wants to get things done and take action and start a battle or whatever. And Neptune just tears down barriers, dissolves things. So and a square always demands action.
Mhm.
So what action could you imagine with Mars squaring Neptune here? That's a tricky one. It's at the very, very last degree. Both Mars and Neptune are at the very final degree of mutable signs.
Mm. Wow.
So that's an interesting point too, because that final degree is considered a very unstable position.
Mm. Yeah. I think this is
Hmm.
something about, okay, you just planted that new moon, at the new moon, you planted a seed the day before, but almost like this is sort of saying, and don't get tied to the outcome
Ah,
because it's not what you think, because
ah,
Mars is like, hey, I'm going to take action, and Neptune's like, "Oh, well, I'm just floating here." So it's almost like the required action is the, determined action to surrender,
ah,
to step back, to sort of say, oh, wow, I have no control over the outcome. Okay. I mean, it's
ah.
a very un-Mars thing to do.
Yeah, I like that. I like the way you just talked about that a lot. That kind of makes sense because yeah, what action can you take with Neptune? Well, one thing to be aware of is I'd say really just be aware of yourself on that, a few days there before and after there, just really paying attention to your own, um, the things that you want to accomplish and the things that get in the way of them, your own foggy thinking, perhaps.
Yeah.
Don't resort to the nearest bottle of alcohol or
Yeah.
you want to really be aware that Neptune can bring a lot of
Yeah.
problems if we try to escape. Surrender is one thing, escape is another. um,
Yeah.
yeah.
A little bit like a load off, though, in a way. If you look at it the right way, it can be a load off in the sense that if you have done your thing and you've worked towards your thing, then you are not responsible for the outcome. And there's not much you can do. So it's just best to say, okay, okay, I've done, as long as you've done your due diligence, and then you can step back and get out of your own way, especially with Mars entering Cancer the next day. I mean,
Yeah.
Mars, okay, Mars does not love being Cancer. It's very emotional. And so it's not happy here. And so you've kind of had a little chance on the third to start surrendering. And then on the fourth, it's like, yeah, well, you need to really understand what's happening for you emotionally, is kind of what's
Mm,
going to start happening with Mars entering Cancer.
mm.
I also just want to add that Mars eventually will retrograde back to Cancer in the future. So this is the beginning of a long journey for Mars. And I'm sure Laura will make a video about that, but I just want to point that out.
Yeah.
And then as you come into the end of this week, it's like you've got more intensity. You've got Mercury doing its final square to Uranus. It's already squared it twice.
Mm,
This is the third, showing of something that you've already had to deal with a couple times, once back in July and once in August.
mm.
And then you have the Sun opposed Saturn. So, yeah.
Yeah, those might be kind of challenging days for sure. That Mercury square Uranus, if you think back, there's a story involved in it because of how this is the third time. So,
Yeah.
it can bring in Mercury square Uranus can bring in a lot of excitement or a lot of anxiety, but there's something perhaps that needs to be said, some communication that needs to be brought to the table, even if it is anxiety producing. I don't know,
Yeah.
that's a tricky one. And then the sun opposing Saturn I would think of that as just a real opportunity to be aware of what is stopping you from
Mm.
doing the Virgo things. What's in the way? What's stopping you from
Yeah.
changing your diet or going back to school or whatever it is?
Mm. Hmm. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's probably part of it. part of a bigger process. I mean, because that's
Yeah.
you know, when you look at the cyclical version of it, the sun opposed Saturn, it's the midpoint of that process. So it's definitely part of some larger situations, not just that moment in time that you want to think about.
And we do need to make a video about cycles.
We do, and we shall.
And we shall.
And then we come to that point where Mercury goes into Virgo. And so now Mercury is in dignity in Virgo. So things shift a little bit here. I think to me, the whole first part from August 22nd to September 8th, I'm just thinking about things feeling a little scattered, like not quite on point, like a little bit of maybe some feelings of instability or confusion a bit. And then once Mercury enters Virgo, it could be like, okay, I just need to get focused. You know, it's kind of that.
Yeah.
And that's great because it's just in time for that first quarter moon square too, which
Yeah.
can bring
Yeah.
action.
Yeah. With Mercury ruling Virgo and now in Virgo, that definitely, and you know, it's really nice at this point. Once Mercury is in Virgo, we've got both Mercury and Venus in their happy places. So
Nice.
that's a
Well,
nice,
Mars is being unpleasant and
right.
troubling.
Right. Mars is not happy in Cancer, but Venus is happy in Libra. Mercury is
Yeah.
happy in Virgo.
And look, Mercury's trying to soothe Mars right there at the first
Right.
moon. It comes into sex of it's
Yep.
okay. It's okay. I got you. You know, I can help. You can talk to me. And I kind of like that first quarter Sagittarius moon because you know what that reminds me of is bring the humor. You know, this is time to play games, like think in terms of some adventuring. Just with that little first quarter moon there in Sagittarius, it's just a little reminder to have a sense of humor about whatever's happening. So play. Yeah, Sun square Jupiter, Venus trine Jupiter. I just see those as those
Ooh.
are expanding in different ways. I mean, what do you think of that?
Yeah. Well, you know, just as a simple, I see Sun square Jupiter and I just think, oh, you know, just don't get too full of yourself.
Oh, yes,
You
details.
know, there can be
Point.
some over exuberance. You know, just, I always tell people when I see Sun square Jupiter, I always think, leave your credit card at home. Because you might, you know, decide you need more than what you really need, or be careful not to overeat at the dinner party, whatever. You know, there's just that tendency to,
Ah,
there's a tendency to expand overly. And then Venus
yeah.
trine Jupiter on that Saturday. That's lovely. Have a party, do something fun, be with your friends.
Yeah.
That's a lovely statement
Yeah.
there.
I like you know, the Sun square at Jupiter is a good counterpoint to this idea of it being Virgo season that you need to kind of take care of your habits and, you know, be careful about overextending and whatever. And then the 12th is when you just say, screw all that, and you completely overextend. So it's a good counterpoint. So it might be incredibly informative. Even if you do overextend, you'll learn something about your limits. Probably.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then that brings us to our first eclipse. We're back in eclipse season, folks. So and this one's in Pisces. So
Yeah, this one's in Pisces. So there is a real change coming around the eclipses moving forward. And I don't want to get into a big conversation about eclipses right now. We may or may not make a video about that.
I'm not going to promise.
Not going to promise.
Yeah. But just think of it as a pivot point. I mean, you know, and again, please check your own chart because this one is happening. It's in Pisces at 25 degrees. So if you have something in late mutable that's already being activated by Neptune, that's going to be activated by Saturn not too far in the distant future, those folks are going to feel this as a pivot point more than others. So just notice that. Just a pivot point. That's all. It's got a little bit greater potency than a regular full moon because it's something that can take 6 months or longer to really manifest. But
So it's
again,
exactly opposed my ascendant.
oh, all right, there you go.
There you
Something
go.
about relationships for you then, you know,
Oh,
something.
big surprise.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. And
So
then
then we get into Mercury opposing Saturn. This is like,
Mhm.
what, a week and a half after the Sun opposed Saturn. Now Mercury opposes Saturn. I think it's just reminding us of what it was that was going on when the Sun opposed Saturn, some awareness of something that's holding you back from moving forward in that Virgo manner that you need to be.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, and then you kind of have time in that week to work. I mean, there's a lot going on that week.
Oh, yeah.
You've got that mutable theme being tipped off as Mercury opposes Saturn. Later it squares Jupiter. So that's kind of
Yeah.
that back and forth between, oh, I want to get big here, but oh, wait, I got to reduce over here. There's kind of this tension between those two things, and really observing limits. Like part of you might think that there's no limit, the sky's the limit or higher, but then there's another part of you that knows damn well there's actually a major emotional limit to how much you can handle and extend yourself. So Mercury's kind of, getting into that mix and tipping off that piece is really going to test your kind of whole thing around how well have you established routines, how well have you managed some of those habits. It's sort of a little test about that.
Right. And I
yeah.
can. And then on the 19th, we've got the Sun trine Uranus, and on the 22nd, the Sun trine Pluto. And that just creates that beautiful grand trine that I'm really looking forward to that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that. So you can see that repeated theme earlier, way back at the end of August, you had Venus doing that. And then at the end of the month, I'm sorry, the end of the season, in this week of September, you're having the sun repeat that pattern of that, creating that grand trine and opposing Neptune, as well, which just shows you something coming to light, something transcendent or something spiritual or something that you've deluded yourself about really coming to
Or
light.
all of the above.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And then the sun trines Pluto because Pluto's now back in Capricorn. So it's actually happening right before our Libra season. So that's the parting shot, or parting gift, really.
Yeah. Parting gift.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that grand trine with the Uranus and Pluto. It's an interesting statement, especially given, Uranus and Pluto being such generational planets, so much connected to the collective. And, I'm sure we could bring this in and talk about politics, but we're not going to.
But those of you who are watching, you can easily just kind of witness what's been going on,
Right.
especially in American politics, but elsewhere too, and see those themes for yourself.
Yeah.
Evaluate those themes. And I just think overall, isn't it interesting how there's like kind of one theme around, this like, ooh, it's a little bit unstable and then it can move quickly with the square stuff. But then at the same time, there's this, really nice opportunity to just sink down into a feeling of groundedness, to take advantage of all that earth energy, to just, I think it's a great time to connect with nature, a great time to make sure you're getting outside, that you're making contact with the dirt on the ground, not just pavement, but get outside and enjoy nature and really feel, and feel that, and feel how supported you feel is just, I don't know, one little member of this giant planet. And you bring that opposition to Neptune there. So that's kind of how I see it.
All right. Well, I think we covered the whole week by week, and now we can get into the individual impacts. And we will start with Aries rising. So those of oh yes, I'm sorry. Excuse
It's
me.
perfect.
My brain went a little wacko there for a second, but we have Aries rising. And this puts the Virgo season, the focus of Virgo season, right there in your 6th house, which is an ideal place to have it because we've been talking with Virgo about issues of health and routines. And that's what the 6th house is about. It's about how we manage our day-to-day routines, what encompasses our lifestyle, what our lifestyle is made up of, how we eat, how we take care of ourselves, how we practice our meditation practices, any practices. So that's what that's about. We can look at a lot of the other things involved here, but one thing I want to recommend for those of you with Aries rising is to go back and think about what there is left for you to do to transform your career. I'm looking at that Pluto, that backing up of Pluto into Capricorn. There's some way in which there's been a huge amount of change occurring in community in some manner, but now there's something for you to pick up in that area of your career.
Yeah, and I think just to add to what Lori's already said here, just a couple other things. One is that we did talk about themes of instability. So for you, Aries rising, there might be some instability that has to do with, I don't know, just the way you're balancing your health and your ability to communicate about it. Like you might need to make sure that you talk about how you're feeling so that you can get what you need. So that might look like something like, telling your partner or whatever that you really need to go, you need to go and to the gym or something to do your Virgo stuff. And you need to make sure you communicate. And part of that communication is going to be supporting not just your physical health, but your mental health, and it's the whole package. So just pay attention to that. And then also be really, hopefully, thankful and grateful for the way that possibly your work life is supporting you. We talked about the grand trine in Earth. So there's a way here in which that can be very supportive, even while you're dealing with the other places feeling a little bit unstable. Lean into that. There's definitely a suggestion that something about your financial situation, your work life and your professional life, and kind of how you handle those habits all work really nicely together. So lean into that part of it while you're discovering what you might have left undone, as Lori said
Right.
it.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay.
Let's move on to folks with Taurus rising.
All right. So Taurus rising, the big focus here with Virgo season is to do with your creative life. That means the way you give of yourself, those things that you do because you love doing them. The fifth house where this is showing up is also the house of play and children. So that kind of playful, generous type of energy that gets generated in a child space, we'll say. So there's a lot here about, I think for those of you with Taurus rising, it's time to just, step away from the need to be perfect, step away from that sort of analytical, like, well, I'm not really an artist or whatever the thinking is, and just go ahead and enjoy some fun here. Like delve into that part of your life, delve into your creative life, use the Virgo stuff to set aside time, to schedule time, to make sure that you're doing something just that's simple and creative and you really enjoy doing. And I think that's kind of the heart of Virgo season. There's also one other thing we've been talking about here is just that, we talked about Pluto moving back into Capricorn. So that means that there's a little more for you. There's something maybe that you missed, something that adds to your body of knowledge and wisdom that you're going to get to kind of revisit before it goes back into your 10th house of career. So there might be a little bit of a flavor of like having to, go back and re-educate yourself on something. About your worldview before moving forwards. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. And yeah, the other thing I want to bring in is that the gift of that grand trine. So for you with Taurus rising, that would really be coming in from, powerful shifts that have happened over the years, really, around your personality and your worldview, that whole area of your worldview, that are at this point really allowing a huge opening in terms of your creativity or how you give of yourself, even though there is also a certain amount of stress coming from community in some manner. There may be some stress there, but really leaning in, especially toward the end of this Virgo season, really leaning into the gift of who you know yourself to be and what you know your worldview to be, and allowing those to support this beautiful growth of your creativity.
Nice. Okay.
All right. On to folks with Gemini rising. Oh, okay. Gemini rising. For those of you who have Gemini rising, the Virgo season is focused primarily right there in your 4th house. So this is really a time for you to get really serious, pay attention to your home and family. We talked a lot about Virgo as far as, really leaning into stabilizing yourself, stabilizing your routines, being of service. So for those of you with Gemini rising, a lot of your service orientation is around home and family. And that's a lot of what's happening here at this time is you're really paying attention to that and really working with a deeper level of understanding your connections to home and family. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there and let you talk for a minute.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because oh, it sounds good, Lori. Got the baton.
I got distracted by some thought about somebody with Gemini rising. I don't know.
Good, we'll come back to it too.
Mhm.
Well, I was also just thinking that one thing that's interesting about this is you can, kind of stabilize your emotional foundation here by nourishing your body. This is a really important time to take care of your habits and your routine so that you can be a more emotionally grounded with Virgo in your fourth house. So that's something that come into my mind. We've been talking about to the idea that that Pluto is just dipping back into Capricorn, so for those of you with Gemini rising, that means that you've been kind of indulging in this newfound empowerment through this wisdom you've gained, and like whoops, Capricorn going back Pluto going back into Capricorn means that you're gonna have to deal with some emotional baggage issue or somebody else's values or attachments to money or whatever the thing is. You're gonna have to kind of go back in and do some work around that, because it's just that's what's being demanded of each of us. So there's a little bit of that. Yeah, just try to think of it as an opportunity, to make some better boundaries about it with somebody you have in your mind here.
Yeah, that's probably exactly what that is about boundaries. But then you also think about the grand trine that's created toward the end of the month,
Mhm.
and it's sort of like the boundaries that you need to create and your own internal psychological or spiritual processes are
Yeah.
really adding to your ability to really be of service to your home and family.
Yeah, like that's where the stability is coming from, like your willingness to have done, the work you've done so far on
Yeah.
just what you just said, your psychological development. Because there is a little bit of, we talked a little bit about stresses too. This stress, in your case, Gemini rising, is a little bit around something to do with how you present yourself and your work life, your professional life, or how you show up in public. There's a little bit of stress in that area. So lean into this reality that you've done this psychological work, that can really support you, and enable you to, just as you said, Lori, be of service to other people around you through all of that. It's a pretty awesome one.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I really love this grand trine because it's really making me pause and think about all the work that's been done over a number of years in these earth houses,
Yeah.
Capricorn and Taurus. And at this point, that there's such a gift from it, from the work that you've been doing.
Yeah. Oh, I like looking at it that way.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Okay, so let's
Okay.
move on to folks with Cancer rising.
Ooh la la. Okay. So those of
Ooh
you
la
with
la.
Cancer rising, Virgo season is happening in your third house. That means that your attention is being drawn to all things communication. This is how you talk. This is how you learn. This might be a writing process that you do. It can be, there's other ways to communicate, but we've covered a lot of them. But anyway, Virgo season really has to do with all of that. So this is a really good time for you to establish routines that are going to support you. I keep thinking about this idea of nourishing your body. Like that's what you need to do during Virgo season so that you can have the stamina you need to do the thing you need to do in order to be of service, to all those around you. So for those of you with Cancer rising, this all just comes down to communication. The third house can also be siblings, and it can also be neighbors and kind of like your local environment. So those are all places where these communication questions might pop up, through a conversation with a sibling or an interaction you have with a cashier at a store, or with the person delivering your mail. Those are the places that you're going to get to see how am I doing with that? Am I meeting the demands of this? Um, and at the same time, that planet Pluto is dipping its toe back into Capricorn. So with people Cancer rising, that means it's going to highlight something that you haven't quite finished that has to do with your partnerships. You're just needing to go back and maybe revisit some of the, do your partners feel like they're on an even keel. Those are some of the questions that might come up before it goes back into Aquarius and you're back to setting your really awesome transformative boundaries. So,
Mhm.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, for a period of time now, the past year and a half or so, you've been really blasting forward with this real powerful change in how you set boundaries, how you work with other people's stuff. And now you kind of pull away from that and get back into just the partnership itself. But it's interesting. I love thinking about the grand trine that's being created. And over a number of years now, you've really changed your way of being in relationship with individuals, capital R kind of relationships and community. And at this point, there is such a gift from both of those areas to your ability to communicate, your ability to be of service with your voice. I think a lot of this season, for those of you with Cancer rising, is really about looking at how can I be of service with my voice? What have I learned from my community? What have I learned from my partnerships? What am I seeing in the worldview, the greater worldview? What clarity is coming from that is really teaching me how to be of service with my voice?
Yeah. And there is a little bit of developmental tension being placed on you that
Yeah.
has to do with possibly your education. You may still need to learn something new that's coming to light, that's going to affect your psychological processes for the better, and kind of, so there may be some stress around that during Virgo season. I'm sure there will be. But that's also where you're growing, and you can really lean into that stability that's coming through your social interactions, that Laurie just mentioned. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's interesting. Okay, we're
I
going to
like it.
move on to folks with Leo rising. So if you have Leo rising, the main focus of this Virgo season is in your second house. Second house is about money, resources, and your own self-worth. So, it's interesting to think about Virgo being in the second house and the focus being there right now, because, we talk a lot about Virgo. uh, Virgo's whole purpose is to be of service. So I would say that it's really important for those of you with Leo rising to think about, how are you of service with your money, with your resources? If Leo has such a reputation for, this great big ego, but you always want to remember that the most positive side of Leo is generosity. So, you kind of put these two together and think of the importance of being of service with your own way you value yourself and with your money and resources. So I want you to think about that. And then the other thing I want to think about is how, with Pluto moving back into Capricorn, there is something around the area of your routines, your lifestyle, that you haven't completed. Some lessons, some learning, some powerful, powerful change over the past years that's happened around your lifestyle. Something about that needs to be revisited. There's still some work left to do there.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny, Laurie, when you're talking about just, the ego of Leo, as a Leo rising person, but it really makes sense, because we all also talk about how what's beneath that when somebody's being arrogant or egocentric is insecurity. And having the, critical nitpicky sign of Virgo in your self-worth, I mean, when it's not being used skillfully, it's being
Right.
used to nitpick yourself, to criticize, to judge. So a lot of the work is around, working with that, balancing that, like nourishing yourself and the value you have to offer other people. And I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but it's also like, what's that positive affirmation that you give yourself on a daily basis? That's
Mm.
a way to really work with that, for those of you Leo rising. And at the same time, we've also been talking about this gift, because we talked about that grand trine. And for those of you with Leo rising, the gift is very much about your livelihood, the service you have to offer to possibly your profession or how you show up in public. And then also your day-to-day routines that keep that all going, all the things that get you to work and, support you while you're, all of those pieces all come together. So there's a real gift here of being able to lean into the work that you've done in those areas of your life and to trust that there's a great deal of stability available that I think you'll get a glimpse of a couple of times during Virgo season.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing because there's also a little bit of stress, as we mentioned in the precursor to this. And for those of you Leo rising, the stress is definitely coming from something to do with like resources, other people's resources, social resources. You might have some consternation about how those things play out. That's also going to show up probably while you're, doing your Virgo work in the second house. So, yeah.
I like that. I like thinking about the trine, just the stabilization from the day-to-day routines and from your career. Yeah, maybe you'll come into money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to move on to folks with Virgo rising.
Ooh, I know one or two people with this.
So do I.
Right. So those of you Virgo rising, I mean, this is just a very important time during Virgo season to really slow down, calm down, get into your body, listen to what your body's telling you, and really nourish yourself. And that is how you are going to be able to do your overall life direction of being of service to others. So it might sound a little bit like an oxymoron. Oh, you got to take care of you. Yes, so that you can take care of others. Yep, that is exactly what I'm saying. So that you may be available. So, it's time to just make sure you're doing that. You might need to tweak a couple of your habits to help you with that. But that's really where the focus of Virgo season is. And while you're Virgoing, you also will have an opportunity to kind of see what that Pluto going back into Capricorn means, because it's been in Aquarius, it's dipping its toe back into Capricorn. So for you, what that's doing is it's going out of the place of habits and health and preventative care and things like that, and your lifestyle, and going back into that creative house. And the fifth house of creativity, I really think that that's a place where you're learning to give of yourself, to learn, is how you are unconditionally loving others and things that you do. So you're going to get an opportunity to just have a little bit of a reminder about what are those things that you just love doing that are part of your personal self-expression. There's some work around that you probably will be revisiting during this Virgo season. What else, Lori?
Well, I'm looking at the whole issue of the grand trine there, and just, that area where you're talking about creativity, where you get to express yourself. People with Virgo rising have worked hard on that for a number of years. And also there's been so much change around the area of your higher understanding, wisdom, worldview. So those two, all of the work that you've done in both of those areas are really allowing you to see in a new way how you can be of service to others. It's really, gifting you with this clarity. I think there's a real clarity of a new understanding of how you can be of service. You may have been under all kinds of ideas of what you need to do to be of service. Well, this period of time might really show you that you've learned more than you think, and you don't have to tie yourself into quite as many knots as you thought you had to in order to be of service. Maybe it can just be easy. Maybe it doesn't have to be so hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think, also that ties in nicely with the other kind of part of the story, which is some of the stressors that are happening in this Virgo season. And for you, they're just simply about their areas of growth that have to do with your partnerships and your professional life. And that's where the growth is during the season. That's where there's some new understanding coming about that's playing into this whole picture of how you are of service to other people. So, yeah.
Well, I honestly think that this Virgo season is huge. I think it's huge. The more we talk about it, the bigger it feels, the more important and significant it feels. I think,
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Sorry.
okay, we're going to go on to folks who have Libra rising. Now, if you have Libra rising, this Virgo season, the focus is really on your own inner hidden parts of yourself. And that can be, I think of that 12th house as it's our psychological understandings of who we are. And it's also our spiritual, where we are open spiritually to information coming from other places. There's a way during this period of time where you can really do a lot of powerful inner work and really, learn to be kinder to yourself. Virgo, the thing that I love so much about Virgo is that level of kindness that there is. And I think in this, for people with Libra rising, I think that kindness really has to be turned on your own internal processes. Um, Now, along with all of that, let's think about Pluto's return into Capricorn. So over the past year and a half, there's been a lot of growth and development and profound change probably in the area of your life that's related to how you give of yourself, your creativity. And all of that's been happening now with Pluto going backwards, it's like that is going to just sit there for a little while. No more big changes there. That Pluto is going to go back into your 4th house. There's some area of your home and family, there's something around home and family that you have not completed, some piece of work that you have to go back and complete.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing we've been adding into these is we talked about the grand trine at Earth ahead of time. And so for you, Libra rising, that grand trine in Earth, I mean, it plays into this, this Virgo season, where what you're really able to lean into is how your kind of intuition and the more emotional layers of yourself, the psychological layers that you've had to do work on for quite some time now, you're starting to see the fruits of your labors here during Virgo season, that you are actually a lot more stable and solid on an emotional level, and how you set your boundaries with other people and the therapeutic processes that you're in than you even realize. Like, you have been cultivating strength in a way that you had no idea. And I think this Virgo season is going to allow you to see that, because we have this grand trine coming up. So that is wonderful, because at the same time, the season's not without stress. There's still some pressure being put on all of us to grow in some way, to learn something that has been difficult to learn. And for those of you with Libra rising, that has to do with your ability to set your routines, to have your habits the way you need them. And also, there might be a little piece of higher education that you haven't quite incorporated. There might be some experience you still need to have that will help you grow just in these next few weeks. So it's not such a long-term thing, but especially in these next few weeks. So that's kind of the mix, so lean into that grand trust, that grand trine, because you have more strength than you realize, is what it comes down to.
I love the way you talked about that, Jenny, because I think that is so important. Yes, how hard you've worked around your deep layers of home and family and around setting boundaries. You've been through a lot for a number of years, and this is really a payoff time. I love how you talked about that. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Laurie.
All right, let's go on to folks who have Scorpio rising.
Righty, so those of you with Scorpio rising, the big focus during this Virgo season is on your community. So this is your social groups, your like-minded cohorts, those folks that maybe you see around town that you don't even know their name, but you know their face because you've seen them for years. We always like to talk about this as that can be that place where you go to the gym, or you go to a yoga class, or you go to a play, and you see some of those same faces of people that you kind of know a little bit. So, that community is really the community that supports you. So during Virgo season, you're really having an opportunity to see that. And this is an important time for you to consider I don't know, like nourishing yourself. I keep thinking again about nourishing your body. Like, how do you take care of yourself? You know, if social situations are challenging for you, this is a great time to think about, well, how can I get more grounded before I go into the social situation? You know, those little tweaks in your habits that can really help you, because ultimately you have a lot to offer your community. With Virgo here, you are a service oriented person. You want to help your community. As a Scorpio rising person, you've got a lot of depth to offer.
Mm.
So, you know, it really behooves you to like make sure you do those little bits of self-care so that you can show up and step into those roles, and fulfill that. So that's part of it, or the main part of it. And then it's also worth considering where Pluto, the planet that's just slipping back into Capricorn very briefly, for a period of time, and revisiting something about the way you communicate. Pluto has been in Aquarius for a while, in your fourth house of home and family, and changes going on there. But now it's dipping back into some way that you communicate, something about your voice. It could be an issue with a sibling or a neighbor that's popping back in that you thought was done and it's not over yet. There's still something to learn here. So that's also part of the whole theme. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting to think about that. You know, you've worked very hard for a long period of time on developing a strong voice for yourself, on developing, allowing changes and developing new types of relationships, probably. And that is really supporting your ability to be in community. So, yeah, really leaning into that, I think, is very important. And like we've been talking about, there is a certain amount of stress during the course of this Virgo season as well. And, the stress is probably coming from, your creativity. There could be some stress coming from children or some way in which you're struggling with your creativity. And there may be some challenges around setting boundaries. Those are pretty, they're not going to last a whole long time. And I don't want to stress those too much, because I think the gift of that grand trine, that support from relationship and from how much you've learned about how to use your voice, is really the thing to focus on, and working within that space of your community.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's move on to folks who have Sagittarius rising. So for those of you with Sagittarius rising, the focus of this season is on your 10th house. This is your career or your social reputation. It's the way people who don't necessarily know you personally see you and understand who you are. That's the 10th house, and that's where the focus is. Now, if you've got Sagittarius rising, you have Virgo in that 10th house. So what's really important to you in your career, your social reputation, is that you be of service in some particular way, that you have some sort of mastery that you bring to the table, that can be of service. So that's the main focus. That's where you're going to really be paying attention during this time. You also want to think about what's happening with Pluto moving back into the second house. Pluto, for a period of time now, has been in your third house. You're really developing a stronger, more powerful voice. But right now, you got to let that consideration go a little bit, because there's something that you have not quite completed regarding your own self-worth. There's some very powerful piece that you still need to go back and work on around, and it may show up as concerning money or resources, but it's really about your self-worth. So there's some other piece there that needs to be managed over the next couple of months. I think Pluto's only going to be in there until sometime in November. So it's a short time. But there's also, you want to think about how much work you've done on yourself around your self-worth, around finances and resources and your self-worth. You've done a lot of work in that area over the years. And at the same time, you've gone through profound changes around your lifestyle. And it's, really leaning into how those two pieces that you've worked so hard on are now supporting your career. That's the gift of this season.
Yeah. Nice. I know, yeah, there's like this stability or groundedness that you may surprise yourself with.
Yeah.
Because the way life is, it's like you work on those things and you work on those things and you may not get to step back and see the perspective of how it's actually served you. And this Virgo season is exactly that, giving that perspective to see what is the work that you've done, that probably manifests, just as you said, Laurie, like in your financial situation or your kind of like visible lifestyle, but there's a deeper component.
Yeah.
There's a more inward component to the work you've done to kind of stabilize yourself. And then the Virgo season really just helps you. It's just a reminder too to like, check in with yourself about how grounded you feel, how stable you feel in your work life. And you may need to tweak and adjust a few little habits here and there to help that, but it's not big. It's just little tweaks. Because that's what Virgo kind of indicates. And then also we did talk a bit about how there's, with all the mutability during this Virgo season, there is there's a place of growth. There is some stress that also is happening. And that growth, which, it can be very challenging, but is also very fruitful, is happening for you in your partnerships and your home life. So there's some impact of those two stresses that is also going to come about during Virgo season. But as Laurie's been saying, that's not, it's not, oh my God, that's terrible. It's like actually this grand trine is super supportive and enabling you to kind of manage those developmental tensions in a way that's part of your growth. So pretty cool.
Great. Awesome. Yes. All right. Let's move on to Capricorn rising.
All right. So those of you with Capricorn rising, you have Virgo in your ninth house. Your ninth house is your worldview, your kind of overall philosophy that has been made up of the learning experiences you've had in your life. Sometimes it's travel, sometimes it's higher education, sometimes it's something you published. Can all be things that are tied in with this ninth house. So that's where the main focus is in Virgo season. I keep thinking about this as a time to just check in with your own routines and your own habits, and is there something you need to tweak or shift a little bit so that you can be more fully present in this area of your life during this time? Is there grounding practices you need to do, or is there something else you need to learn about that's going to help you in this few weeks ahead of you? So that's kind of what the focus is during Virgo season. We have a few other things going on. One of them is that the planet Pluto has been now in Aquarius for a while, but it's just dipping back into Capricorn just briefly, not for a whole long period of time. But that is a symbol for some undone work that has to do with your identity, your life direction, something to do with the way you hold your authority publicly. There's something about that is showing up, some little piece that you're gonna, see for better, for worse. So yeah, that's kind of that. What else do you have to add, Laurie?
Well, let's think about that grand trine here for a minute. We can just think about, right now, like you were just saying, Jenny, about Pluto going back into Capricorn and really having to do a little more work on your identity, yourself as an authority, all of that. But the reality is as well that you've done a lot of work on yourself in the past since Pluto moved into Capricorn, which I think was in 2008. So it's been a long time. You have really done a lot of profound work on yourself. And at the same time, you have been through a profound amount of change and development in regards to your creativity. And really, this grand trine that's being formed right now is kind of suggesting to us that all of this work that you've done in these two areas of your life are what's really supporting you now. So there's this huge support from your understanding of who you are and your own ability to give of yourself, your creativity, those two areas are really supporting this beautiful area of wisdom, really opening up this window to your own inner wisdom. I think that's really beautiful.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, we did talk a little bit too about just a couple stressors or
Yeah.
developmental things that might be going on this month too. And so in your case, Capricorn rising, that has to do with, yeah, I mean, we've already been talking about this, but kind of your overall habits, and the way you communicate about those habits. There's some stress there. So what I kind of think that could mean, for example, on the ground might be something about you need to change something about your routines, and you need to talk about it. You need to express that. You need to kind of say, hey, I'm going to go and do this thing. So there's a little bit of tension around that. But that's really just, that's where the growth is, because there's so much support, as Laurie has already mentioned, around, I mean, essentially your identity and how you express yourself. There's so much support there. You're so grounded in who you are at this point that this little area of growth is just something else to work with. I mean, really, at a basic level, it's nothing to get super worked up about. It's just an observation about where some of those stresses may come out in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's awesome. Okay, let's move on to those of you with Aquarius rising. If you have Aquarius rising, the focus of this Virgo season is in your 8th house. This is the area, this is a very deep area of our lives. This really relates to how we navigate the more challenging issues of the people in our lives. And it's how we set boundaries to protect ourselves within that space.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really, yeah, the 8th house is a tricky house because we really have to navigate other people's stuff, and it's not always easy. So that's where the focus is. And with Virgo in that house, we can think of the fact that, you know, it is an area, our ability to navigate other people's deep issues is a place where we can really be of service to others. It's a place in our lives that is very important. And right now, this is the place to focus. At the same time, we want to think about that movement of Pluto back into Capricorn for a brief time. And, you know, Pluto has been in your 1st house since, well, quite a while now. It's been quite a while. But you have been through profound internal personal change. Since Pluto moved into Aquarius, you with Aquarius rising, there's been a profound shift and change in just who you are, how your personality. So now with Pluto moving back into Capricorn, it's really giving you an opportunity to go into some of the deeper hidden reaches of your own psychological or spiritual self to do a little bit of work that is necessary before you can really fully do the profound change around yourself and your personality. So I think that's an important thing to think about. You've got a little bit more deep inner work to do before you can move forward.
Yeah. And then at the same time, I mean, part of what really supports this whole situation during Virgo season is we talked about that grand trine in Earth that's occurring at different moments during this season. And for those of you with Aquarius rising, this is happening in the places where you have Earth, which is the very behind scenes house of the 12th house. And it's also your kind of emotional foundation, like deep down. So all of this is really just saying, like, guess what? You've done a ton of work on your emotional self over the years, and you may not even have realized how much you have shifted and changed in those areas. But during Virgo season, you're really going to get a view into that. And the view is going to come from the way you handle other people's intense stuff that you bump up against. And you're suddenly going to realize how you're handling this differently. That now you can do this with a new set of resources that you didn't quite even realize you had. And that's because for you, the earth signs are kind of hidden away in the most secretive hidden houses of the chart. So it's really cool because you don't even maybe know that you have those tools in the toolbox, and then suddenly, boom, you surprise yourself with your resiliency.
Mhm.
So that's something that's super helpful to all of this. And I keep thinking too with Virgo in the 8th house, there's definitely something about trusting the wisdom of your body, letting your body let you know, when you need to kind of make a shift, because you've got a lot of innate intelligence in your physical body in general and for you in particular. So that's kind of some of the other pieces. The one point of kind of contention or stress or growth, depending how you want to look at it, is coming from maybe a few little hesitancies that have to do with your self-worth, and then how you express yourself. Maybe you feel a little inhibited at expressing your love for some reason or another. That's where there's some growth in this season. So also pay attention to that. But overall, it's just such a support and a great perspective to see where you are.
That's great. Okay, we're going to move on then to folks who have Pisces rising.
Pisces. Okay. So those of you with Pisces season, geez, let me start that over. Those of you with Pisces rising, you have Virgo season happening in your 7th house of partnerships. So that means that the focus during this whole season is, in a nutshell, like how you are able to be of service through your partnerships. Don't mishear me that thinking that I'm saying that you're supposed to be some sort of servant to your spouse. That is not what I'm saying. It's more about how you, through your partnerships, are able to show up as this person who knows how to implement, who knows how to get things done, who knows how to pay attention to detail and really help out. So it's more that. And I really think this is a great opportunity during Virgo season to really think about that and really work with that piece. And in particular, think about the way that you connect with your partner through your habits, like the meals that you cook. Like, do you go for a walk together? Do you have other practices and rituals and things that you like to do together? And those are going to be places of really nice connection during Virgo season. So that's kind of the main theme here. There's a couple other additional themes, and one of them is that the planet Pluto, it's been in Aquarius for a while. It's just dipping its toe back into Capricorn just for a couple of months. It's really not very long at all. And so those of you with Pisces rising, this is an opportunity to go back and kind of revisit some kind of questions you have that have to do with how you fit into your community, what do you feel like you're in integrity with, whatever your communities are. You're going to get a chance to revisit that just for a brief moment before Pluto resumes its transformation of your subconscious processes. So that's something to think about as well.
And then there's the grand trine. So, that just kind of brings in the fact that you have done a tremendous amount of work for a number of years now around the community issues, around, the community that supports you, the people in the world that support you. You've done a lot of work in that area, and you've gone through a tremendous amount of changes in regard to how you communicate, how you manage your day-to-day communications. Those two areas are really what is supporting your relationship right now. So that's really that trine aspect is really lovely. And as we've talked about as well, there are a few challenging points throughout Virgo season. And for you, it really shows up in, yourself, some sort of resistance you're going to see to your partner, perhaps some sort of resistance around home relationship and who you are. But that's kind of a learning place. It's a place of learning, but really the gift of this season is the thing I want us to focus on.
Yeah. Yep. And you really have a lot of resources available through those social connections that you work so hard to build.
Yeah.
And it's really show up in your partnership. So it's pretty cool.
I
I don't
think
know.
it's,
I really like
yeah,
it. Yeah. I like
it's
for this.
really lovely. We're talking over each other now, Jenny.
Sorry. Go
We,
ahead, Lori.
we don't do that very often. It's actually surprising. I was just, that whole idea of how much effort we've put into these certain areas of our lives. And right now we're getting this real gift from it. It's really lovely.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay. I think we are complete. We are done. And we did it, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. It's nice to have you back.
Thank
thank
you.
you.
It's nice to be back.
Yes. and
Bye-bye,
thanks.
everyone.
Bye.